Eli stood in the middle of the field, the wind cutting through his jacket, his palms bleeding from work that had taken months, work no one else saw, work he once believed he'd never start. Before him stretched rows of young trees, their branches trembling against the light of dawn. In the old wooden chair by the porch, the sign still stood, his grandfather's handwriting carved deep into the wood. You can't wait for motivation. Discipline grows what dreams only imagine. Eli smiled, not because it was over, but because he finally understood. He looked down at the soil, dark and alive, and whispered to himself. It all started with 2 seeds. The fog came early that morning, the kind that swallowed the world in silence. The town of Maple Hollow, tucked between tired hills and half-forgotten roads, seemed to be holding its breath. Eli sat on the porch steps, coffee cooling in his hands, watching the mist roll over the fields like a slow tide. He was 31, old enough to feel the weight of lost time, young enough to believe he could still change everything, if only the right moment would come. He'd been saying that for years. His phone buzzed in his pocket, a group chat, old friends posting pictures of new houses, kids, office promotions. Eli stared at the screen a moment, then locked it again. The silence felt heavier than the fog. Behind him, the screen door creaked. His grandfather, Henry Carter, stepped outside, a man built like the land itself, weathered, quiet, steady. His back curved slightly from years bent over soil, his hands scarred and strong. He had fought in a war half a century ago and had returned home to build a small life out of discipline and dirt. In his hands, he held a small tin box. "Morning," Henry said, sitting beside him. Eli nodded. "Morning, Grandpa." The old man opened the box. Inside, 2 small seeds rested on a piece of folded cloth. "Plant them both," he said. His voice was calm, but carried a gravity Eli couldn't quite place. 2 seeds? Mm-hmm. Same soil, same sun. But see which one you feed. Eli frowned. "Feed? They're seeds. I'll just water them." Henry looked at him, his gray eyes almost smiling, but not quite. "We'll see." He stood, brushing off his hands. "Storm's coming tomorrow. If you want to plant, best you do it today." And then he walked back inside, leaving Eli staring at 2 seeds and a riddle that sounded simple but felt heavy, almost biblical. He turned them over in his palm, identical, ordinary. But the tone of his grandfather's voice lingered. He planted them behind the barn, in a patch of soil that hadn't seen care in years. He told himself he'd come back tomorrow to check, to water, to do it right. Tomorrow. That word had been his companion for a decade. Tomorrow, he'd apply for that job. Tomorrow, he'd start running. Tomorrow, he'd stop wasting time online, stop comparing, stop waiting. Tomorrow never came. It only disguised itself as someday. That evening, he sat on the same porch, staring into the distance as the fog began to thin. His grandfather worked in the field long after sunset, a single lantern glowing by the shed. He never talked about discipline. He just lived it. Eli watched him from afar, feeling something he couldn't name, part admiration, part guilt. He wanted to be like that, solid, certain, unshaken. But wanting and being were 2 different things. When he finally went to bed, the sound of the wind against the window reminded him of a promise he had already begun to forget. Days turned into weeks. The fog lifted, the rains came, and Eli's life stayed the same. He drove to town, worked part-time at the auto shop, scrolled through endless feeds, watched highlight reels of lives that weren't his. He'd think about the seeds sometimes, in those brief moments between distraction and sleep, but the thought would fade like everything else. His grandfather never asked. He didn't have to. Every morning before dawn, Henry was out in the field, steady as a clock. He could see the light from his lantern through the window. That small golden glow, unmoving in the dark, was a quiet accusation. Some people still choose to rise. Sometimes Eli wondered what kept the old man going. It wasn't money. The farm barely paid for itself. Maybe it was habit, or pride, or maybe, Eli thought, Henry just didn't know how not to work. One Sunday morning, after sleeping through his alarm and missing another chance to start fresh, he found his grandfather sitting at the kitchen table, wiping soil from his hands. "Your field's turning hoiled," Henry said, casually as if mentioning the weather. Eli blinked. "My field? The one you planted. The one behind the barn." He didn't know what to say. He hadn't been there in weeks. "Ah," he murmured, nodding slowly, pouring himself another cup of coffee. "That's what happens when you plant and forget." Eli tried to laugh, but the sound fell flat. "It's just a couple of seeds." Henry's gaze didn't move from the window. "So is every forest." The silence after that felt long. Outside, the fog was gone, replaced with sharp morning light. The air smelled of soil and memory. Eli stood, restless, unable to bear the weight of the stillness, and walked out into the day, unaware that something inside him had begun, just barely, to shift.
The weeds were winning. When Eli finally went back to the patch behind the barn, he barely recognized it. Wild grass had swallowed the earth, and where he remembered planting, there were only thorns, broken stems, and a silence that mocked him. He knelt down, pulling at the ground. The soil crumbled dry and lifeless in his hands. He thought of his grandfather's field, green, disciplined, full of quiet order, and felt the sting of comparison like a wound reopening. He had the same soil, the same seeds, the same chance. But where his grandfather had cultivated, Eli had abandoned. Anger rose in him, not at the seeds, but at himself. He wanted to blame the weather, the soil, anything else. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had waited, and waiting kills. When Henry came by later that afternoon, Eli was still kneeling in the dirt. His hands were scratched, his nails dark with soil. "Why didn't mine grow?" Eli asked, voice breaking with a mix of shame and frustration. "You gave me the same thing you planted. Why did yours live and mine didn't?" Henry looked over the field, then at Eli, long and steady. "Weeds grow on their own, son," he said, "but the tree, you have to fight for it." Eli stared at him, trying to find the hidden meaning, but it wasn't hidden at all. It was simple, too simple. He'd been feeding the wrong seed all along. That night, he couldn't sleep. The words echoed in his head. Weeds grow on their own. He lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how easy it was to let life slip through the cracks, how comfort disguised itself as peace, how indecision dressed like patience. When he closed his eyes, he saw the field, wild, choking itself. He saw years of excuses taking root. Every "I'll start tomorrow" was a weed. At dawn, Eli got up. No alarm, no speech to himself, just action. He pulled on his boots, grabbed a shovel, and walked back to the field. The sky was gray and heavy, the air cool and wet with morning mist. He started working, slowly at first, then faster. The ground resisted him, his hands blistered, his back screamed, but he didn't stop. The rhythm of effort took over, ancient and grounding. For the first time in years, Eli felt something alive inside him. Not motivation, not excitement, but resolve. When he paused to wipe the sweat from his face, he looked at the horizon and saw his grandfather watching from the porch. No words, no nods, just presence. That was enough. Over the next few days, Eli returned again and again. He cleared the weeds one by one. He dug deeper, turned the soil, watered, and waited. There was no rush, no promise of quick reward, just work. The field began to breathe again. The smell of earth changed, richer, cleaner. When he walked back to the house each night, his body ached, but his mind felt still for the first time in years. His phone stayed silent on the counter. The group chat buzzed without him. He didn't miss it. Instead, he found small moments of quiet satisfaction. The sound of rain on the roof after a long day. The way sunlight broke through the clouds at dawn. The distant bark of the neighbor's dog echoing through the hills. These things had always been there. He had just never slowed down enough to notice them. One evening, after weeks of work, Eli saw it, a small, fragile sprout breaking through the soil. He knelt down and smiled. It wasn't much, but it was real. That night, he wrote something down in an old notebook. Don't chase the feeling, chase the action. The feeling comes later. It became his quiet mantra. And day by day, the seed grew, just as he did. The difference was almost invisible at first, but over time, his movements changed. He woke before sunrise, not because he wanted to, but because something inside him knew he needed to. He had stopped waiting for inspiration. He had started to earn it.
Years passed. Eli's hair grew darker at the temples, his hands rougher, his shoulders steadier. The field that once mocked him had become a place of quiet pride. The seed he fought for had become a tree, tall, firm, bending slightly with the wind, but never breaking. The seasons had come and gone, painting the land in gold, gray, and green. The air of Maple Hollow had changed little, still heavy with dew in the mornings, still carrying the faint scent of old wood and hay. But Eli had changed completely. His grandfather had grown frail. The once unshakable man now moved slowly, with deliberate care. Yet his eyes, the same steely gray, never lost their clarity. One evening, as the sun bled orange over the horizon, Eli helped him to the porch. They sat together, like they had years before. For a long time, neither spoke. Finally, Henry said, "I see you kept planting." Eli smiled faintly. "Had to make up for lost time." Henry chuckled, a dry, tender sound. "Time's not lost, son. It's just waiting for you to catch up." They sat until the stars began to appear. The old man looked out toward the tree and nodded slowly. "That one's got roots now. So do you." Eli swallowed hard. There were no more riddles between them, just truth, plain and earned. Months later, the winter came early. The fog returned thicker than ever. Henry passed quietly one morning, before dawn. There was no ceremony, just a stillness that felt both cruel and peaceful. Eli buried him beside the small chapel at the edge of town, under a tree older than both of them. The days after blurred together. Grief didn't come as tears. It came as silence, as pauses in the middle of work, as an empty chair by the porch. But as he walked through the field each morning, Eli began to feel something else. Not absence, but presence. His grandfather was still there, in every routine, every sunrise, every act of quiet perseverance. He kept tending the field. Seasons passed again. The tree grew stronger. He built a small fence, painted it white. Then one spring afternoon, he made a wooden sign and placed it by the porch, his grandfather's words carved into the grain. "You can't wait for motivation. Discipline grows what dreams only imagine." He didn't carve them for others to see. He carved them to remember, because he knew what it cost to forget. Years later, a young boy from the town came by, curious about the rows of trees stretching toward the horizon. "Did you plant all these?" the boy asked. Eli smiled, nodding. "Started with just 2 seeds." The boy frowned. "2? But there's so many." Eli looked at the trees, their leaves trembling in the light. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's how it works. You plant one with your hands, and another with your habits." The boy didn't understand, not yet, but someday he would. That night, as the sun fell and the first stars pierced the sky, Eli sat on the porch in his grandfather's chair. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of rain and soil. He thought about all the days he'd almost given up, all the mornings he'd dragged himself from bed without reason, all the moments he'd chosen effort over comfort, and how those small choices, invisible at the time, had built everything around him. He closed his eyes and smiled. Somewhere inside, he could still hear his grandfather's voice. "Inside you there are 2 seeds. One grows from comfort, the other from effort. Only one leads to life." Eli opened his eyes, the dawn light breaking over the hills, and whispered, "Then I'll keep feeding the right one." The fog began to lift, and the world, quiet, golden, alive, began again.